All protocol observed, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I'm pleased to be here with you all today to discuss how we can better plan and improve our cities. Welcome to the city of Kigali. We are hoping to learn more from the projects you've implemented in your home cities across Addis Ababa, Dar es Salaam, Mombasa, Nairobi, Kisumu, Kampala, etc. In Kigali, we have been working on the key strategic areas of transit-oriented development with the range of conceptualization to implementation. We recently adopted the City of Kigali Master Plan, which details our future urban vision for the city. It involves the guidelines for each zoning with clear zoning regulations, ensuring that we have dense mixed-use developments along the main city transport corridors. We have also prioritized transit-oriented development is a robust public transport network. Over the past decade, the city of Kigali has taken major strides in improving the quality of public transport services. The city reformed the informal paratransit sector, working with the operators to form a cooperative. Today, four companies operate city bus services under contract with the government. We have introduced high-quality buses and smart card fare collection. Going forward, we plan to expand the size of the bus fleet, implement dedicated bus lanes, and introduce a bus rapid transit system. To complement the public transport system, Kigali is making it easier for people to walk and cycle. One of our initiatives was the pedestrianization of KN4 Avenue in the city, in the CBD, Central Business District of the city of Kigali. I invite you to visit the Imbuga City Walk during your stay in the city of Kigali. It's closer to the hotel, just between the Bank of Kigali and the City Hall. Following the success of the Imbuga City Walk, we have launched 2 additional car-free zones in Ibiryogo and in Remera. We are also developing 3D friendly spaces in our ongoing street upgrades. Kigali is also a cycling city, and we are working to develop a citywide cycle network. Dedicated cycle tracks will enable cyclists of all ages to travel throughout the city safely and comfortably. In partnership with the Gura Ride, Gura, which means buy and ride, Gura Ride, we launched a bike share system, and we plan to introduce e-bikes to the system by the end of this year. Kigali's wetlands are another opportunity to create high-quality public open spaces and new walking and cycling links, making journeys by active modes quicker and more enjoyable. As we improve transport system, we want to ensure that more of our residents can live close to economic, educational, social opportunities. Towards this end, we are creating incentives for the development of affordable housing within walking distance of public transport. Under the new master plan, developers enjoy higher densities if they develop affordable housing of the planned PRT corridors. The city of Kigali also piloted an informal settlement upgrading at Mazi. The city is happy to host you at the project site during the second day of this workshop. As we integrate transport and land use planning, we also need to introduce measures to control polluting vehicles. Kigali is implementing a smart parking system where we are organizing on-street parking areas, introducing market-based parking fees and adding electronic enforcement to keep cars off footpaths. Better parking management will encourage more people to travel by active modes and public transport. In sum, Kigali believes in developing an inclusive, sustainable urban environment that expands opportunities for people with all walks of life. Over the course of this conference, we invite you to explore and enjoy our city, which is the city of urban excellence. I would like to thank the organizers of this very important conference, including ITDP and UN Habitat, as well as the funders, HVT and IKI. We would like to thank all our visiting guests for making the journey to this country of thousand hills. We hope that you have a productive and inspiring time in our city. I do here declare the conference open. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, Honorable Vice Mayor. Maybe one announcement. You do have a registration sheet on your table. Please feel free to register yourself on that, please. Yes, without, we can move to the first presentation of this first day. Let me welcome Maureen to give an overview of the principle of the transit-oriented development. Over to you, Maureen. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome to this session. So we're starting off with a presentation on transit-oriented development principles. So I'll dive into the key principles we look at when we talk about what it is to be TOD. So to start, what do we mean when we look at transit-oriented development? So this is an image of Nairobi along Moi Avenue, and this is how it is as now, and this is what it is when you, or the ideal of what it could be when we look at. This is the ideal of what it would be when you look at how you integrate all TOD principles within the same section. So transit-oriented development looks at linking land use policies to transport investments with the aim of improving access to jobs, schools, and recreation. So ideally, when we talk about TOD, we look at the symbiosis, yeah? So the symbiosis between transport systems and the built form with the transport model choices. And this means the variety of transport model choices that each city can offer for its population. So when we talk about a TOD development, or what it means to be TOD, so just being adjacent to a transit, yeah, a transit stop, does not necessarily mean TOD. So in any case, it can actually just mean your transit adjacent, yeah. So this is an example of an image that shows what it means to be transit adjacent, where as you can see, this is the main stop. So this is the station stop. And then next to it, you have these developments, but you can see there is no connection between the developments and the transit stop. There is no, you can even clearly see there is no even crossing that is allowed. So you're not allowed to be able to cross from the station to the neighboring developments. The developments also have high walls, so they do not encourage any form of NMT, any form of connectivity, accessibility into the developments. So ideally, you would be sort of coming out of the station and having to walk probably all this way to be able to access this development, or be able to walk all that way to access this development. Yet, you could have easily created a connection here and a connection here into this development. So this is an example of what we call TAD, which is not ideal. So when we talk about TOD, this is what we are looking at, yeah? So in TOD, we have 8 principles that we focus on. The key principle being transit, yeah? So that having a good transit and efficient transit mode. And then on top of that, we have all these other 7 principles that come into place and support and connect with transit. So we have mix of uses. So this looks at how you have a variety of uses within a development. So say commercial, residential, office, all existing within one development. The next principle we look at is called compact. So compact looks at how do you arrange all this within one sort of block or one development, yeah? So ideally, compact, of course, encourages the next principle, which is densifying, yeah? And densifying looks at how you then have a lot of uses and a lot of population existing within a smaller radius or a smaller section. We also look at shift. So shift looks at changing the mindset of what we have now, which is streets, yeah? So which is cities that are more car-oriented. So shift looks at how do you change that shift in the mindset and creating cities and streets that are more people-oriented than car-oriented. We also have walk, which is another principle that encourages walk. So that works hand in hand with also cycling, so encouraging cycle, and the connectivity between the NMT and the public transport. So as I said, we have transit, which is the key principle here. So ideally, to be able to be considered TOD, you have to be, or the development has to ideally be within what we call a 500-meter radius to a transit system. So this is a very good example of a transit system. So this is the BRT that is in Dar es Salaam. So I would say they are a leading city in terms of being able to provide a BRT system. They have the DART phase 1, which is currently active, and it's very efficient. When we also talk about public transport, it's not just it being a public transport mode, it also has to be of good quality, yeah? So when you're looking at, say, for example, a BRT station or a BRT line, so this is in the case of a station, you're looking at having good pedestrian and cycle access, you're looking at having dedicated bus lanes, you're looking at having high capacity buses, and you're also looking at having a secure and enclosed secure station. So this is what we try to discourage. So when we are pushing for public transportation, this is what we try to discourage so that you can increase the efficiency of the road space. So this is an example of what we ideally have in a lot of our cities. So this is a 3-lane carriageway, right? Which provides 3,000 passengers per hour per direction. So that's the movement that a 3-lane carriageway would allow. When you look at another scenario, which is now looking at how, say, we have added like an expressway in Nairobi, so which is also a move that is being done in a number of our cities. So, okay, we said that this is good because it improves the movement of passengers to 4,700. But what we do say and what we do encourage is look at what happens when you now have the same carriageway, yeah, having dedicated bus lanes. You can see the ridership or the movement of passengers per hour within the same carriageway goes to almost 12,000 to 45,000. Yeah? So ideally, you can see how the BRT, the dedicated bus lanes, are more efficient, yeah, use and form of public transport. So this is the example that I had mentioned in Dar es Salaam, and is to show the connectivity between a BRT system and the surrounding NMT, yeah, for an ideal situation when you look at how the two integrate. So you can see the lane, so that is the lane that is clearly demarcated for footpath. That is the lane that is clearly demarcated for cycle track. That is the lane that is clearly demarcated for BRT, and then the lane now dedicated for mixed traffic. So ideally, when we're looking at a BRT transit line, this is what we mean by a good example as well of having a BRT line. The next principle we talk about is walk. So what do we mean when we look at walk? So the first element of walk looks at the quality of footpaths. Yeah. So in that we look at what defines a good footpath in terms of the zone system. So a footpath should have a good demarcation of a frontage zone, and then ideally the pedestrian zone should be at least 2 meters and more in terms of width. And then ideally you should have a furniture zone, yeah, that acts as a margin between the pedestrian zone and the carriageway. So ideally this is a very good example of the good quality of what we mean when we talk about having a footpath. So it's not just having any type of footpath, the footpath's qualities also have to be of good standards. When we talk of another element of walk, we talk of crossings. So what do we mean when we look at crossings? So ideally we should be able to provide safe crossings. So this is an example of a good example of a safe crossing. So this is, we encourage ideally tabletop crossing as opposed to say having bridges, because these are more universally accessible. And ideally having a tabletop crossing is a more efficient use of crossing for pedestrians, yeah? And so here you can see the good quality, it's very well demarcated, it's tabletop to allow that smooth transition, yeah, in terms of being in the same level. So it's universally accessible. It should also be able to have other elements such as signaling, so proper signaling to be able to stop and calm the traffic that's coming. Creation of also boulevards that allow that clear demarcation of that use, yeah? So another element we look at so another element we look at in walkability is what we call permeable frontages. So, and especially again along a transit corridor. So this is a very good example of a street with permeable frontages. So ideally you have the ground floor uses of a development having commercial spaces, and these spaces are open, yeah? So they have accesses where pedestrians are able to enter and maximize their entry throughout the buildings. At the same time, you have this provision of an arcade, yeah? So even that working environment is a good enjoyable working environment that allows that activity and that vibrancy of the street. Another element we also talk about is visually active frontages, yeah? So ideally this is what we would recommend. So this is an example of a shopping street in Mombasa that has multiple shops and building entrances at ground floor. So you can see as you're walking, you can be able to see what's happening, the activity inside the building. So ideally this is what we encourage, as opposed to say having a very high wall where the pedestrians are not able to interact with the uses, yeah, of the development inside. So this encourages a more active, a more vibrant street, yeah, and a more vibrant and enjoyable experience as you're going across the street. So the other element, the other principle we look at is cycling. In cycling, we look at how you can have cycling as a separate, yeah? So as a separate zone that separates the carriageway and the footpath, yeah? And it being of different, so having its own zone, yeah? So not mixing footpaths and cycle tracks, which is something that tends to happen quite a lot in our designs. And what do we talk about when we look at cycle standards in terms of the cycle path? So ideally it's connectivity to the walkway. So ideally we recommend having a wide adjacent footpath of around 4 meters. When you're talking about the cycle lane, it should be a clear width of at least 2 meters. And this should also have a smooth surface, yeah? So sometimes we have some cycle paths that say use curved bro, which is this sort of material, which is not ideal. So this is a smooth surface like this, enhances the cycling experience. And also we look at having a zone here, yeah? So you should have a clear physical separation between the mixed traffic, yeah? And the cycling lane. So this enhances security and safety of the cyclists. So this ideally is what we are talking about as not a good form of cycle, yeah? So sometimes just painting on the road, yeah? And trying to demarcate a cycle lane. This is not ideal, yeah? So when we talk about this principle, when we talk about cycling, it has to have the elements of a good cycle standards, yeah? So this is not, as you can see, this is not safe because it's very easy for them to be hit by an oncoming car, yeah? There is no clear demarcation between the two. You can see even the line is almost now fading, so after a few years, there will be no clear demarcation. You can see there is also no clear demarcation between the walkway. There's actually no walkway, yeah? So there's the forced walkway, and there's no enough space. So in terms of space, this is why we say it's necessary to have efficient space so that everyone is able to have that good and safe experience and not being able to have sort of accidents from interacting with each other. So ideally, this is what we talk about as a very good environment. So here you can see the students are able to even converse as they are walking because there's enough space to allow for that. At the same time, you can see there is no conflict between the walkway and the cycle. So even those who are walking are able to have their own space to walk. Yeah? And as we've said, we need that safe zone that demarcates between the cyclists and the carriageways. The next principle we look at is connect. So in connect, we encourage connectivity of streets through a network design. As I had said earlier, a lot of our streets are car-oriented, which was existing in the old plans that we've had, yeah, that have guided the city for many decades. But what we're trying to encourage is in the retrofitting, yeah, of our new planning principles and planning documents is to encourage a more people-oriented planning system. So this means that in the network, yeah, we are trying to encourage a dense network of direct shortcuts to improve accessibility, where you have smaller connectivities that are mostly or of higher percentage being for NMT, yeah, being able to connect pedestrians and cyclists, yeah. So that's what we're encouraging, and it's a more well and organized as opposed to a more organic and not connected. So this is more efficient, yeah, in terms of even shorter distances, you're able to move and improve accessibility. So this is a very good example. So this shows, as you can see, this is the running from north to south of this image is a carriageway, right? But it's also a shared carriageway space. And you can see you have this street that runs east to west that was probably initially a carriageway, which has now been designated to NMT users. So this is only allowed for cyclists and pedestrians. So you can see it's a very nice sort of safe space, yeah, and a crossing that cuts between the blocks, right? This is also another form of what we encourage as connectivity. So these are sort of short, smaller connections that cut across through buildings. So ideally, this is what we encourage, because in many scenarios, you have this sort of building wall being able to share. You would ideally have had a wall here, yeah, and it cuts across, and it doesn't allow this accessibility. But by being able to open this up for pedestrian use and even for cyclist use, this improves the connectivity, because now you can see they don't have to sort of walk around these building blocks, yeah? You're making the distances shorter and you're opening up these spaces and providing a very good pedestrian environment for people to cross. So ideally, this is what we encourage. So when you're looking at it in terms of a design element, yeah? So this is a plan, ideally, that is showing what we usually have as a block definition, yeah? That is demarcated through, so the orange here, the orange-brown here represents sort of a carriageway demarcation, yeah? So like a road demarcation of a block. how we can work to improve this and improve the dense networks of streets and paths is now encouraging these pedestrians and cyclists accesses, yeah, in between the blocks. So it cuts sort of the bigger block into smaller sub-blocks, yeah, which are more pedestrian oriented. So that's, yeah. The next principle we look at is mix. So in mix, we look at the element of mixed use, yeah? So in mixed use, we look at how you can have a variety of uses existing within the same development. As you can see in this, so this is the CBD, yeah? Where you have the BRT line that's cutting across the street. So this street is actually fully demarcated for just the BRT line. And along or next to it, adjacent to it, you can see these buildings have a high mix of uses, yeah, which is ideal. And it's actually a very common character for Dar es Salaam city. And you can see, so the ground floors are usually majorly commercial and retail. And then above, you usually have the floors that are highly residential or office, yeah. So we actually encourage housing as a very good addition to, in terms of uses within the CBDs, because this street is able to remain active and is able to remain vibrant throughout the day, yeah, and increase ridership of also the buses. Instead of the situation that we sometimes have where you have to, say, move to the city to work during the day and then move back, yeah? So this increases ridership throughout the day instead of only at peak hours. Additionally, it encourages the vibrancy and the safety of the street, yeah? So this street is very lively throughout the day, even at night, yeah? So it improves that safety, you're able to still walk the streets. In some areas, you cannot really, because now the CBD becomes a ghost town, because it's highly commercial and office, during the night, it becomes now like a ghost town, yeah? So this is what we encourage when we talk about mix of users within the same development. The next element of mix is mix of incomes, yeah? So when we talk of mix of incomes, we look at, so this is another example still in Dar es Salaam, where you have this block. So you have this block and this block, which is the National Housing Corporation that provides affordable housing to the population, yeah? But what is interesting, or what's currently happening, is how you have these new developments that are coming up, yeah? So if this was probably an older NHC block like this, what you have is the new planning allows for sort of a JV, yeah? So like a private-public partnership, yeah? Between the government and a private developer. That allows the developers to be able to, even if they're going to, so it allows for increase of density, yeah, of the unit, and also it keeps the original users and dwellers within. So this is ideal because we avoid, or we try to avoid relocation of the prior users. We want to keep them within the new developments, yeah, instead of having that relocation. So this is ideal. When we look at density, we have the Kigali master plan, which will be looked at in more detail by Rana Solange of COK. But I can look at it, and this is a very good master plan that is moving in the right direction in terms of what we look at in terms of the density, yeah? So you can see the dark blue line represents the proposed BRT line system, yeah? And next to it, so adjacent to it, the master plan encourages high intensity of zoning, yeah? The highest intensity actually is along the BRT line, yeah? And it even encourages further FAR if whatever development exists along the BRT line allows for affordable housing. They even get a more more development incentives where they get 30% higher FAR if at least 50% of the development goes towards affordable housing. So this is ideally what we look at when we talk about that connection between density along the transit corridor. So as you can see, here is where you have, along this, you have the, the concentration of density of users. So high intensity of users around quality rapid mass transit. So in our cities, we do have density, yeah? So we have high density, but so the idea here is to look at what opportunities, what do you have in your cities, and then what opportunities do you need to tackle or to improve. So in certain cases, we have, in our cities, we have high density that is existing, yeah? But it's not supported by infrastructure, yeah? So like in this scenario, we have high density, but there's no walkways, there's no cycle tracks, there's no open spaces, yeah? So this has to be, they have to work together, yeah, and interrelate. In other times, in other aspects of the cities, we have high density, but it's low rise, yeah? So ideally, we are also trying to encourage high density and high rise, right? Yeah. So it's just to show you, ideally, it's to look at what you have in the cities and what you need to improve on. Yeah. The next principle is compact. So compact works very well with density and they work hand in hand. So in compact, we are trying to avoid sprawl, yeah? So in this case, or in this scenario, we've got sprawl, which encourages more roads construction, it encourages traffic jams, increases pollution, and there's poor utilization of land use, yeah? So by having a compact development, as this example here, what are the benefits? The benefits is that it promotes transit, it promotes density, it promotes mixed use and mixed incomes, yeah? It promotes better quality of life, and it maximizes the land development, increasing ridership. So this is an example of what we term as sprawl, yeah? Where there's no connectivity. Like you can just see it's, you know, it's everywhere. There's no clear streets, there's no clear connectivity, no clear road network. So this is ideally what we are trying to promote. So even as the city grows, you need to be able to have this organized system, yeah, an orderly expansion of growth, yeah, because this also allows, in line with this, it will allow an orderly expansion of infrastructure. So not just transport infrastructure, but also utilities infrastructure to support the increase of population within the area. So this is an example of the city of Ahmedabad in India, which has very good incentives of compactness and densification, yeah? So it has a very good, the city has a very good street grid system, yeah? Which has allowed for it to be able to then look at compactability and densification and allow for different FARs along different street networks, yeah? So you can see along the transit corridors, they allow for higher FARs, so like here in the CBD where it's 5.4, as opposed to say when you're further away in other sort of connectivity. So the interesting case of Ahmedabad is because of the good of the good street grid system, as opposed to other cities within India, they have been able to have a very good and controlled development, yeah, and have increased higher FARs and higher development guidelines that support the densification and compactness because of this. And so what you have is, if you have private land, they are able to have these incentives, yeah, through land readjustment, where if you have a private land, you're able to designate, yeah, a percentage of it for public use, yeah, and that also comes back to benefit you in terms of being able to say increase your FAR or having better development opportunities. The next principle we look at is shift. So in shift, we are talking about changing the perception, yeah, that changing the perception that having, even changing the mindset. You know, when we all leave university and we all start working, the main goal is, oh, I can't wait to have a car, yeah? So we need to start changing that narrative so that the main goal is being able to provide safe streets, is being able to encourage walkability and cycling, yeah, as the main component of modal movement within cities. So in that aspect, we look at having pedestrians and cyclists as the most desirable, yeah? So as the highest priority, even when it comes to planning cities, yeah? And having private and vehicular uses as the least desirable, so the least priority, yeah? Because in reality, a huge percentage of our population also exists within this realm, yeah? So it's how do we then be able to plan cities and change that mindset that we have to plan the cities for the greater majority, yeah, and ensure that efficiency of use of the cities. Another element of shift to look at is parking management. So as we are promoting pedestrian cities, we're looking at the challenges that we face with parking management. So cities, you have parking, you provide more parking, more vehicles are attracted. And then after more vehicles are attracted, again, the demand increases for parking. And the parking supply again is increased. So it's a never-ending cycle, yeah? And to what end, yeah? So this is what we are trying to avoid. So when we look at parking management, it's how to reduce the use of cars and how to, especially within a transit-oriented area, yeah? You don't necessarily need to encourage the use of cars within that. You should be able to rely on NMT and you should be able to rely on public transport. So this is an example of how performance pricing can be used as an initiative to look at and to handle parking management. So this is an example of a street in London where increase of fees is connected with the demand, yeah? And so what they did is, as the time went by, so they increased the costing, yeah? So this is initially when there was no meters. So when there was no meters, you could see, you know, so many people have parked. But as the cost increases, there's reduction of parking to an element where, you know, the cost is now so high that, you know, the parking has greatly reduced. And now you have this population probably relying on public transport and NMT to move, which is ideal. We are looking at what's happening at the moment. So a lot of the developments nowadays, you know, have to, because of the planning laws and the planning regulations, they enforce a lot of parking, yeah? So this is an example of a building in Nairobi, Britam Tower, yeah? So because of the office space being 35 square meters, the law enforces them to have to provide 1,000 parking spaces. So because of that, you have this land use here that is underutilized because now all this has to go towards parking, yeah, to provide for this building. And this is a building that sits, you know, along a proposed, you know, it's just only 700 meters from a future BIT station. So this is not ideal, yeah? So this is what we are trying to encourage. This is an example of a building in a building in London called the Swiss Re building, where out of the total of 48,000 square meters, yeah, that is offered for space, there is only 5 parking spaces in this building. And it is actually meant for the disabled, yeah? Because ideally they're encouraging public transportation, yeah, and NMT. What are the opportunities for that parking space? So this is what we try to show. For that one parking space that takes about 23 to 28 square meters, this is the potential, yeah, of what you're looking at. So parking space needs to stop being seen as a right, you know? It needs to be seen as an opportunity, yeah? As an investment opportunity, where for this parking space, you could actually have one affordable housing unit, or you could have an office space for 4 people, or that same space could offer a dining space for 15 people, yeah? So there's a lot of land or a lot of area that we're living which has all this potential and these opportunities, of course. So as I summarize, this is the main take-home that I want you to have. So we want to go against building or having cities for cars, yeah? So encouraging building of roads, you know, looking at all this congestion because of traffic jams, increasing in pollution, and even accidents. And this is what we want to focus on, and this is what we want to lead with. So cities for people, where you have such a good environment, yeah? So where you have transit, it adds density, you cut parking, and you have a better quality of life. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. And yeah, thank you for setting the tone for this 3 days conference. We will be mainly, for the following sessions, we'll be discussing or learning from different cities how we can apply or how we are applying these principles of TOD. Before that, we didn't have any master plan. We just construct, because it's not, actually to construct you need to have a plan. We just construct randomly. But in 2013, we had our first master plan. And after 5 years, we started the process to update that master plan so it can be in line with other strategies that we have in place in Rwanda. For example, the master plan we have in 2013, only less than 5% of our land was reserved for open space. But when we updated our master plan, our target is to have at least 55% of our land reserved for just to be for agricultural use, to be used for public space, and also reserved for forest. So the 55% will be protected land, and only 45% will be developable land. In our master plan, we are promoting really affordable solutions. For example, we have mapped the area reserved for affordable housing, and also with the help of UN Habitat, we have mapped all informal settlement we have in Kigali, and also strategies that can be applied to upgrade those informal settlements. And we have introduced inclusionary zoning that can allow developers to construct more than what is planned in the master plan, and we provide also incentives. We are also promoting the mixed use and mixed income. Maybe to be specific on the incentives that I provide, for example, we have a zoning, and the maximum height allowed is G+4. If a developer wants to go higher and build G+10, we can allow him on condition that they're going to provide affordable housing and also comply with the green minimum building compliance. And also, if actually we have a list of requirements, so the developer can choose. Also, if the developer is willing to provide public space within his land or provide community amenities, it can, the developer can be allowed to go higher to build more than what is allowed by the master plan. And also, the government has approved an affordable housing fund so we can be able to make sure that we'll be able to have affordable housing in Kigali. That affordable housing fund is targeting low-income earners and also middle-income earners. Actually, the interest rate in Rwanda is between 17 and 19%. But when you are eligible, the affordable housing fund can be, you can have interest, you can have a mortgage, and the interest rate will be 10%. And the period to pay your loan, usually it is 10 years, but between 10 and 20 years. But when you are eligible for the affordable housing fund, the mortgage can be paid up to 25 years. As Maureen said, we have zoned all affordable housing along our BRT, and actually it is a justification for that investment to construct a BRT, and we are promoting the high density in all those zonings along the BRT. We have also mapped all, because I don't know if you have been able to take a tour in Kigali. We have a lot of informal settlement. And our target is not to relocate everyone. We want to upgrade those informal settlements and improve the living conditions. And also, Maureen mentioned something about having high density and also going higher. Not only having houses that are scarce in the neighborhood. We also want to promote high density in our informal settlement. That's why we are promoting informal settlement upgrading instead of relocating everyone.
so they can go outside Kigali. We have introduced a policy to reduce the parking allowed for development. We are now setting the maximum parking in all area in Kigali. So we can be able to control, because we are promoting the public transport, so we can be able to control our agenda of having a city for people, not a city for cars. We have industrial zoning everywhere in Kigali, but along those industrial zones, we have also affordable housing, so people can be able to work and have that 15-minute city. Not people living in Gahanga and working in Nyamirambo. We have all zoning for affordable housing along the industrial zone. We are planning sustainable and resilient infrastructure. We are making sure that the infrastructure are available to everyone and everywhere in Kigali. That's why we have introduced the BRT. We want to make sure that the infrastructure we are planning meets the standard, and they are also affordable. If the infrastructure we are planning are not affordable, we will not be able to provide those infrastructure everywhere in Kigali. We are also promoting the NMT strategy. We have NMT network along our BRT, and we want to make sure that within our neighborhood we have also NMT, especially in our informal settlement. When we upgrade the informal settlement, it's not only provide asphalt road, we also make sure that we have public space, we have also footpath, we have those basic infrastructure, because majority of our citizens are pedestrian. As you can see, we want to have green corridors everywhere. We plant trees along our roads. We want to have open space network everywhere. We want to have a bike lane along our roads, all our roads we are planning in Kigali. We want to promote the public transport. We want to have a parking strategy, so the Kigali will not, our city will not be a parking space, because we want to promote the public transport. That's why we are promoting green corridors, green infrastructure, and green building in Kigali. This is our priority. Actually, this is new for us, to be honest. We started the pilot project of a bike lane during COVID. During COVID, as you know, we were facing all the lockdown, and most of our public transport were not available to everyone. This is when we have introduced a bike lane, and we have also approached a developer called Right, and they have provided a bike sharing scheme, and we started by a pilot project just to test if the implementation of that idea is feasible in Kigali. And since we have experienced a good success story, we want to extend that network and have a bike lane everywhere in Kigali that is working, and also that bike sharing. When we are implementing the master plan, we are all facing challenge. I'm not sure it is not only for Kigali. We are facing a challenge of limited public land, because we want to have those bike lanes everywhere along our road, but expropriating the land that is needed is expensive. But we want to have it, we are going to do it. And the budget issue is also one of our challenge. There is also that challenge of lack of integration. And also we are facing that challenge of supply that is not meeting the demand, especially in terms of affordable housing. I want to tell you a story about how we are upgrading our informal settlement. And Nico is here, he's the one assisting the city of Kigali to implement that project. Actually, before that project, the city of Kigali was expropriating everyone. It was expropriating all informal settlement we have in Kigali, and as a solution to upgrade the informal settlement. But that was not a sustainable solution. We need to have a Kigali for our citizens. We need to have everyone staying in Kigali. We are working with Swiss Corporation Development to implement this project. As you can see on this image, the first image, this is how it was, and this is the after image. We have approached 3 families, and they have accepted to give us their land, and we have started a pilot project of our pilot project. And I say the pilot project. Actually, we have a pilot project of 4 hectares. We want to upgrade the entire 4 hectares and have those people living in 4 hectares and housing them in 2 hectares. And when we have that idea, we wanted first to test our idea. That's why we have a pilot project of a pilot project. And for the land of those 3 families, we have constructed an apartment of 10 families. We have compensated those 3 families, their units, and we got a balance. That balance, we have approached their neighbors, and their neighbors accepted to be part of the project. And we constructed a second block. As you can see, this is the previous image because it is transforming. I'm sure you're going to visit that project tomorrow after tomorrow. And we could design that project with everyone, with the beneficiaries. So we make sure that the project is inclusion and we capture the needs of the resident. This is the target, this is the neighborhood we want to have at the end. As you can see, we have this image of informal settlement in Kigali, but our challenge is to have this image on the right side. But it is not possible because it is expensive to expropriate, to construct those roads. But we have come up with an idea. And as you can see on this image, on the first image, this was the situation before we started the upgrading of that project. As you can see, we didn't even have enough public space in those in that area. We didn't have enough green space we needed. Actually, this is the number. Maybe to be quick. This is the cut. This is the current slum pattern we have. And usually when we upgrade the informal settlement, this is the plotting option we have. But there is also other options to upgrade the slums. And this is what we did. We have took these 4 hectares and we have decided to resettle everyone within this land of 2 hectares. And we have saved a land that can be developed for other purposes, or we can sell that land and have money to construct another phase. And because all informal settlements we have in Kigali are located in prime area, the land has high value. That's why the project is costly viable. This is the end image we want to have in Gitega at the end of our project, when we will complete the informal settlement upgrading of our project. Actually, the pilot project, it is on this land, but the entire 150 hectare is an informal settlement that we want to upgrade. Because this project, the pilot is a successful story, we will extend our project and in the entire Gitega, and we will also continue using this scheme to upgrade all informal settlements we have in Kigali. When upgrading our informal settlement, it's not only providing basic infrastructure like roads, drainage, street light, it is also providing public spaces and also providing a decent house for our citizens. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Solange. I think we are now having an interesting moment for question and answer.
Thank you. Pilot Lambert from Slovakia Architects. My question is to the speakers that have been, maybe the delegates as a whole. Transit-oriented. We're talking about less cars, more walking, more public transport. One of the biggest challenges we have as consultants working in the private sector, when you're working with developers to put up developments or buildings to make sure that the development happens, is the viability of developments if people cannot get to it or cannot travel to it. And one of the biggest challenges is if I don't have enough car parking, it doesn't commercially work for me because nobody's going to come to my development. And this happens across. We're working in multiple places in Africa, and it's a problem everywhere. So the developer will tell you, we saw a building there that's got 1,000 car parking spaces in a silo and one next to it. We literally tell you, I've got so much office space, I've got so much retail space. If I don't have this number of car parking spaces, I can't do the investment. It cannot happen. Now, where you've got a place where public transport is still in its infancy, as in it's on paper, but not in reality, how do we balance that sort of like desire to encourage a viable investment in our cities versus policy that says less use of the private vehicle versus the use of public transport? How do we balance that when public transport is still in infancy? In Rwanda, BRT is still being talked about, and yet it is in the public policy documents when it comes to development.
And most of them are in your hands as engineers and planners. But there is one which I think is at least challenging to us in Kigali, but I think we share it as a whole. The shift. How do we change the perception to make sure that all these good plans that we have are put in use? Because sometimes we plan them, and when it comes to implementation, the decision makers just put them on the shelves and they start correcting dust. So I would like to hear from Maureen and maybe from others, from other cities. What strategies are you using to make sure that the shift is cleaner and faster? Thank you.
I think visual issues, which is visible in every cities, including our city artists. So I have one question about the project, which is you use two methodology, upgrading and redevelopment. But there is an issue which is raised in our country, that the livelihood of the peoples. How will change the livelihood of the peoples? What is the income of the peoples in that area? How will you solve it? Because redevelopment or upgrading, they have income issues, social issues. So how will you solve this as a planner? I have these questions. The other questions about the transit-oriented development. We have a challenge in every city. How we connect the connectivities and mixed land use, there is a problem. They want to have that parking on roadside, and there is a parking demand, but we need to protect the road from parking. But is it there is any option to give the chance for the private sectors to develop their own parking than public parking? How you solve this one? Thank you very much for giving this chance.
What was asked by the architect on the incentives that we are going to employ to encourage the densification along the corridors for affordable housing. What are the incentives that you're exploring? What do you have in mind? Is it tax breaks? Is it subsidies? What are you thinking about? I think maybe we can discuss on that because we also consider the same thing in Nairobi. We can have a discussion on that. Thank you.
And what the police say, especially with parking. I think it's also connected to the last question.
Thank you. Like my colleague said, Asaba, sometimes there is a plan and the implementation that are not collectively can plan as planners, but politicians have also to buy that idea. If there is no political will, we are going to have that beautiful plan in our shelves. That's why we need also to educate everyone. We have also this fight. Paider knows that sometimes we say we need the minimum. We can also allow people to have zero parking, and our bosses say, how can you have zero parking? It is possible to have zero parking, but on condition to have an efficient public transport. If we don't have an efficient public transport, we are going to fail our plan of having the minimum parking requirement. And I think it is a process, and we need everyone to understand that policy. Maybe my colleagues from other cities are going to share their story and their view, but this is what I think.
We have quite a challenge in terms of balancing parking spaces, especially with the developer. Most of the developers, I also face the same challenges like him. Most of our developers would come in, and even sometimes commercial developers, they would want 3 parkings or 5 parkings but for 100 square meters of space. And the main issue is that there's no public transport system. So what we usually do nowadays is to be able to accommodate both. We design for parking, but at the same time in the mind we think of the future possibility of converting this particular parking space into something that is usable when the BRT comes into play. So that is how we work around it. I think the slide that was shown earlier where, for instance, in London, when the parking fees were increased, all of a sudden we realized the parking spaces have reduced. So what we need to do as architects and probably planners is to be able to design our projects in a way that we can be able to look into the future and say, when this thing comes into play, this is how this particular building is going to be converted so that we can have more commercial space, we can have more residential space within the same skeleton that this particular building would have. It's a normal form of evolution that we usually look into in the design of projects. But until the BRT system comes into play, I think all that we can do is to be able to anticipate how the future will be and design for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think
I've been working on the Kigali Master Plan in 2018, and now I'm leading the Basic project that we're going to see tomorrow. So if you have questions on that, probably the best is to talk about more in detail tomorrow. Regarding this parking, actually we addressed the same issue when we were designing the Kigali Master Plan, and actually we work also with ITDP there. I think one strategy is to shift from the plot logic, so I need to find my parking space on my plot, to a neighborhood or city-wide parking strategy. So this is what we did. We actually tried to estimate the amount of parking that was required and work in a logic of integrated use. So when you have a mixed-use neighborhood, you know that you will have specific use at specific time of the day. So you create probably a longer use of the parking space that at this point can be combined and shared between residential use, commercial use, other type of facilities that use the park in a different way, a different time of the day. So I think the role of the public here, and this is what the city basically committed, is identifying areas that can provide parking space for the full neighborhood. And this, I think, is the key input that the technicians should give to the city, and then, like Solange was saying, the political will to actually implement. Then, who is managing the parking? Can be the private, can be the city. Of course, you can generate revenues from this parking, but if you ask any developer in the world, they will ask you for more parking space, because this is exactly what they perceive, well, at least in Africa for sure, yes, and I know in other parts of the world as well. They will ask you for having a minimum amount of parking space, so the negotiation is there between the city and the developer, saying, okay, you just get this amount, but then the rest can be provided by the public transport or by a decentralized parking space that can serve you, but also other properties. This somehow is actually somehow welcomed by the private sector, because they have to invest less space and less money in developing their own parking laws. So it could be a win-win. Yes, just that.
I think there was the question on incentives to encourage affordable housing. I think if you look at the Kigali master plan, they have good incentives that are already promoting that, yeah? Where if you have affordable housing within your development, you as a developer, yeah, you get extra benefits. So say like you have higher FARs as opposed to your neighbor who probably is not considering having affordable housing in their development. So it's true, it's how you play, in my view, it's how you play with development rights that you give developers, yeah, that will now be able to encourage affordable housing. In the case of Dar es Salaam, I had said the NHC, yeah, so that's the National Housing Corporation, that provides housing, yeah, and it's affordable housing, yeah, to the owners. So they have but the buildings, because they've been providing housing for quite some decades, the buildings are not, they're in the process of maximizing that land use, yeah. So like I said, I'd shown you the buildings, say, are ground plus 3, yeah. And so you have the same plot, and they want to encourage density and compactness, yeah. And so that same development sort of plot now has a higher, so they can go higher. So now they can do ground, say, plus 8, yeah. And what they do is they don't work alone. So it's how you also work with the private sector. So they have investors who come in, so developers who come in, and then there's a joint venture agreement that is done, yeah, where they say that for the JV to work, the owners have to also be considered. The owners of those units, the older NHC units, have to be considered in the new construction. So they have to actually be able to still stay on that plot, yeah. So you have that element of the population that was there still remaining, instead of avoiding this whole relocation that tends to happen, yeah. And then on top of that, they have the benefit of now being able to maximize that plot, having higher FAR. So even you have now new population coming in to mix, yeah. So it's about looking at such incentives, and then looking at locations, as we've said, of these affordable housings. If it's close to a transit system, and I know we're talking about, even when it comes to parking, we're talking about, say, that provision of parking in reference to a proposed public transport network. In the case of Kigali, I believe even the current public transport is still good, yeah? So it's how do you start, because you see, it won't be a sudden shift. It's not saying from 100 parkings to 0, you know? So it's how do you start changing that policy. So say if it's from 100, if you say for every 100 square meters, you give, say, 2 parkings, how do you reduce that and start saying, okay, every 100 square meters, let's say 1 parking, yeah? And that, I think, is in the master plan, in the parking element of it, where the Kigali is now trying to have, so there's minimum parking, but there's also maximum parking allowed, you know? So that's a good start, is how do you start looking at how you can change that and gradually change that, yeah? So that at the time now when there is the efficient, you know, BRT sort of system that is in place, it's now able to align with that change, yeah? And I think that also ties back to the shift. So you're starting to gradually change the mindset, yeah? So as you're reducing the parking, you're also encouraging people to note that there's actually good public transport system that actually works and that is usable, and you're encouraging that use, so that when that transition now comes to a PRT system for that, in that instance, it's still, approachable. That's my point.
Unfortunately, throughout the principles, I did not see anything to do with the people factor. The people. Where do we position them in all of this? Because they are very critical. Then on the issue of affordable housing, what's the yardstick? How do you determine the affordability? Who can afford what? That has been a very big question we have been having in Uganda when we are talking of affordable housing. Maybe we can learn something from here today. Thank you very much.
You said the people are at the center. So all these principles are actually then to be able to ensure that you have a people-centered approach.
Thank you so much.
Then a round of applause to all of you who contributed. We are ending the first session on introduction to TOD. Let's have a group photo, just where they are in front of the entrance. I think we will have someone to direct us, so enjoy your tea break.
1, 2, 3.